So, folks, we're going to get started probably about 5 minutes. We're still waiting for one more panelist, so get set. We'll be getting started in a little bit. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for attending tonight. Tonight is the City of Spokane Human Rights Commission's Courageous Conversation, Reimagining Public Safety Town Hall. Again, thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Anar Peace. I am a commissioner for the Human Rights Commission. Tonight with me, co-emceeing will be Commissioner Justice for All. Just want to give a warm welcome to Justice for All. So with that, as typical with a Human Rights Commission meeting, we start with a land acknowledgement, which Commissioner for All will read for us.
We acknowledge that we are in the unceded lands of the Spokane people, and that these lands were once a major trading center for the Spokanes as they shared this place and welcomed other area tribes through their relations, history, trade, and ceremony. As we take a moment to consider the impacts of colonization that changed the dynamics of this shared land, our lives, and those who came before us, may we also acknowledge the strength and resiliency of the Spokanes and their relatives. As we work together making decisions that benefit all, may we honor this land's ancestors while we do that. We ask that you recognize these injustices that forever changed the lives of the Spokane's people and their relatives. We agree to work together to stop all acts of continued injustices toward Native Americans and all of our relatives. It is time for reconciliation. We must act upon truths and take action that will create restorative justice for all people. Thank you.
All right. Again, thank you all for coming. Again, my name is Anar Peace, a City of Spokane Human Rights Commissioner and a 25-year police accountability expert and activist. I'm here tonight with Commissioner for All, and we'll be your MCs for this Spokane Human Rights Commission Town Hall. So let's have a courageous conversation on building bridges and understanding the true human costs of the badge on both sides when we deal with the topic of use of force and use of force fatalities in our community. Before we get started, I want to thank all of our partners of this work, the Spokane Human Rights Commission and the Executive Committee, the Spokane Public Library, SPD, the Office of Police Ombudsman. The Human Rights Commission would also like to thank our city and other elected officials that are here tonight in the room. I see Councilmember Wilkerson is here, and there's other folks from the Office of Independent Investigation. This is a new Washington State office that was created a few years ago to do independent investigations, so we're really glad to have them here tonight. Plus tonight, we have several human rights commissioners that are in attendance. I want to thank all the commissioners for all the hard work that they do in our community. And lastly, due to the serious nature of these matters, these are the following guidelines for all participants and audience members for the Courageous Conversation event. Listen from the heart, which means that we listen with an open and non-judgmental way. Speak from the heart, which means we speak our truth, we speak honestly and with respect. And utilize empathy from the heart so that we are guided by compassion and not our egos in these courageous conversations. I must also add this about tonight's conversation. We are going to be talking about some hard topics tonight, like deaths from violent means. These topics can be hard to hear about or talk about because of the emotions they bring up within ourselves. These emotions are very valid, and it's okay to have a hard time with them during this conversation. It's also okay to take a break, to take care of your needs, which I must also note that there are bathrooms to the sides of the rooms, so if you need a safe place to take a break at, that's a wonderful place. And with that, let's go ahead and have a courageous conversation. Commissioner Farrell, would you do the introductions, please?
We have in the center Spokane Police Chief Kevin Hall, Chief of the Spokane Police Department and former commander of the Field Services Division of the Tucson Police Department, where he served for 32 years prior with distinction. Bart Lowe on the far left, myself on your right, the Office of Police Ombuds, and is the certified practitioner of oversight through the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, and a commissioner for the Criminal Justice Training Commission of Washington State. Bart is also a U.S. Marine veteran with over 20 years of service as a military policeman with 5 additional years in the intelligence field. Curtis Robinson, the second seat from my left, a commissioner for the Criminal Justice Training Commission of Washington State, Spokane NAACP, third vice president, Revive Center of Returned Citizens executive director, and a WCPA Washington Coalition for Police Accountability regional member, and a Spokane Human Rights Commissioner. We have Jim Lady, executive director in the white, executive director of Citizen 926, a nonprofit organization helping citizens access public records, and he is also a U.S. Army veteran. Jim is a member of the Spokane Community Against Racism, SCAR, as well as a serving Washington Coalition of Police Accountability regional member, and an impacted family member of police violence. In 2017, Jim's best friend, Craig Johnson, was shot and killed by a Bonner County Sheriff deputy following a call for a welfare check. When he wasn't heard from for a few hours, Craig had been Jim's best man at his wedding and an uncle to Jim's children. Cynthia Manycolors, a Washington Coalition Police Accountability regional member and an impacted family member of police violence. In 2023, Cynthia's son, Bjorn Manycolors, was shot and killed by 2 Spokane County deputies. Bjorn was described by friends as kind, loving, and always willing to help others. And we have Debbie Novak, Board of Directors President for Citizen 926, a nonprofit organization helping citizens access public records, and is a member of Spokane Community Against Racism, SCAR. Debbie is a WCPA Washington Coalition for Police Accountability regional member and an impacted member of police violence. In 2019, Debbie's son, David Novak, was shot and killed by a Spokane police officer, which then in 2022, the city settled the wrongful death lawsuit with the family for $4 million. David owned a construction business and spent a lot of vacation time in Maui with his friends and family. And he was just 1 flight hour away from getting his helicopter pilot's license before his death.
Thank you so much. Let's give a warm hand to these panelists, please. So with that, let's get into some of the context of why the Spokane Human Rights Commission is hosting this courageous conversation and the background on how this event came to be. Back in late April 2021, it was announced that the Spokane Police Department was the 3rd deadliest police force in the United States, according to a police accountability tool, Mapping Police Violence, which is a research collaboration with activists from Stanford University and Teach from America. We had been holding steady on that list from Mapping Police Violence as the 5th deadliest, but in 2021, we rose to the 3rd because we had 7 deaths in a 16-month period. And SPD has been among the 10 most deadliest departments per capita since Mapping Police Violence was founded in 2013. When we became the 3rd on that list, for me as a 20-plus year police accountability expert, I took those facts to the media. Crim TV did a long interview with me and others that were on this stage, in which we conveyed the 3rd deadliest police force ranking for Spokane. I knew my words during that interview would get some kind of pushback from the previous police leaders, But when that pushback did happen, it was quite shocking and a little scary. 53 days after I did that Crim TV interview, former Sheriff Ozzy Knizovich called a press conference, and then he recorded a 16-minute YouTube video in which he called me a liar about us being the third deadliest. In the chief's video, or in the sheriff's video, he calls me a threat to the community because of my lies, and then the sheriff challenges the media in that room to stop giving me credibility by doing interviews with me. While during the whole 16-minute video with the sheriff, he kept my name up on PowerPoint. The sheriff's video was released on Juneteenth, and I happened to be at a community event, which both me and Councilmember Betsy Wilkerson watched the video together. We only watched a few minutes because the video made me sick, which then made me feel worried about my safety, and I left that community event. Safety concerns from that video led me to hire an internet security firm to help me with potential online threats. And for a brief moment in time, I changed the way I moved and worked in our community. When the Spokane Human Rights Commission heard about the sheriff personally attacking me, they were appalled and dismayed that the sheriff was once again criticizing the City of Spokane Human Rights Commissioner. In 2017, Sheriff Ozzy demanded an apology from the whole Human Rights Commission due to the fact that a commissioner had liked a Facebook post from someone else who was talking about the lack of diversity of the sheriff's cadet class. The commission did apologize to the sheriff's office, and they did this with the hopes of having better communications with the sheriff and the Spokane Human Rights Commission, which never happened. So, in 2021, when the sheriff was coming after another commissioner, the Human Rights Commission acted more strongly this time. The Human Rights Commission passed in 2021 a resolution regarding public discourse and civic debate concerning reported rates of deadly force by Spokane police. This resolution from the commission invited Sheriff Ozzy to participate in a dialogue via courageous conversation, joining other community leaders and stakeholders that have expressed interest in participating, including, at that time, Spokane Police Chief Craig Meidel, as an approach towards public discourse that would benefit the community and build trust with our public safety officers. The fact that both the sheriff and the police chief, which the chief also did a video at that time, both of these police leaders called mapping police violence ranking system junk science. So the Human Rights Commission felt having a courageous conversation about this topic would build some bridges. At first, both police leaders tentatively agreed to participate in the courageous conversation, but then they backed away and bailed out from the conversation. And now, 4 years later, Spokane has a new police leadership, which meant the Human Rights Commission was now able to go forward with this courageous conversation event. I want to take this opportunity again to thank the police chief and the ombuds for sharing space with us tonight, as well as I want to thank you all for all the hard work that two of you do in our community. I will note that we did invite the current sheriff, John Knowles, to be a part of this second Courageous Conversation event in the past few months. And for some reason, it's been crickets from the sheriff's office. But I get it. These are hard conversations to have about police use of force. In fact, America started this conversation about 35 years ago with the beating of Rodney King, a black man that was severely beaten by LAPD, with 57 baton strikes from 7 officers. A federal judge would later rule that of those 57 baton strikes, only 7 of those were just. But the other 50 strikes, those were unconstitutional, and because of that, that led to officers going to jail. Shortly after Mr. King's beatings, those officers said that they had to use that kind of force on him because he was high on PCP. But when the talk screen came back and it was clear, officers then said the force was used because of him having excited delirium. This term, excited delirium, is a made-up term that states that people on drugs or in a mental crisis can have superhuman strength and are impervious to pain. No medical association in the world recognizes the term, and what's more telling is that all of these medical associations said that the term is actually racist and harms those that are facing mental health challenges. But over the years, police have used excited delirium to justify abuse of citizens. And due to that fact of this term being used, it has had very deadly effects on how modern day policing is done. According to the Washington Post, the U.S. has seen over 10,000 fatal police shootings since 2015 to 2024. We've heard these names, and we must say their names, like 12-year-old Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, Eric Gardner, Sandra Bland, George Floyd. Here in Washington State, since 2015, 400 plus individuals have been killed by police, and we've heard those names, and we must say those names, like John T. Williams, Leonard Thomas, Shirlene Lyles, Manny Ellis, whose family just got a $6 million settlement from Tacoma on top of a $4 million settlement from the county. And then there's Jesse Saray. The officer that killed him is now serving 17 years in prison after that officer had killed multiple people in his past. Here in Spokane, since 1994, we've had 75 community members be killed at the hands of law enforcement. We will be showing a list of those names at the end of the event, but it must be noted that only one of those 75 cases has been ruled unjustified force, and that was the case of Otto Zim in 2006. Currently, Spokane is ranked the 4th deadliest police force in the nation. And again, we've heard these names, and we must say their names, like Michael S. Kurtz, a homeless man killed out of House of Charity after surviving a police shooting 2 years before that. Names like 70-year-old Nancy King, who was homeless, Robert Bradley, Craig Johnson, Bjorn Minicolors, David Novak. After hearing these names, we in the community must recognize that each time a name hits the news, huge portions of of people in our community start grieving the pain and loss of their loved ones. Those grieving are families, friends, coworkers, and neighbors of the person that died. And that's how you can become an impacted family member. For those impacted families, their grief is public, while at the same time, the public doesn't support them by offering the same grief services that murder victim families get from government services. Also, impacted families are shut out of the investigative process, so they never really do feel like they get justice served in their case. As far as police reform discussions, impacted families never get a seat at the table. And even when families force themselves into the rooms with those discussions, the government still won't listen to impacted families. That ends today. This courageous conversation, we are so grateful to have 3 impacted families here to share their voices with our community, while also being in space with police leadership. And so with that, it's time for this incredible conversation. And so with that, Commissioner Farrell, could you please read the panelist questions? And I also will note that we will have space for Q&A for the community. There's index cards out there, so if you write down your questions.
I'll be timing you all as well, so try to keep your answers a little bit short, and not everybody's going to be able to answer every question. How have officer involved fatalities? Sorry, that's the alarm clock, I guess. 1 second. Okay. How have officer involved fatalities affected you, your family, or your community personally or emotionally? Can we start with Cynthia?
So, in case the brain freezes up. Okay, it's working. The effect for me and my family has been trauma and the loss of someone we love. He was a son, a brother, a nephew, a cousin, and every killing of this sort ripples out and can re traumatize many in the community, especially someone reading the news and seeing that an officer that killed their loved one has now killed someone else's family member. One of the officers that killed my son had killed someone else before in a very similar manner, in the back, running away. So how should we feel? My family feels angry, horrified, and unsafe. And I know we're not alone in that. And I wish that it were not happening as often as it is, but I'm grateful for the people in the community that are fighting to change things and make us safer in reality. Thank you.
Pass it to Debbie.
Let's see, how has it affected myself and my family? It breaks you. It's hard to even come up with the words to explain how painful it is, and I'm sure that anybody here that has children can't even begin to imagine what it'd be like. It's not just a loss. Someone was taken from you. That person was taken from you purposely, and it was intended. Someone did it on purpose. And so that's a really hard thing to deal with, because, you know, people die, you lose loved ones, but you're not supposed to lose your children, right? And the other thing I wanted to add to that is it affects you not only in your immediate family, but in your community. It affects you in your church, your school, your job. And and it does affect your health. It affects your mental health and your physical health as well. So, thank you.
Jim, you want to talk about who Craig was in our community and what that loss is to our community, how that feels?
Sure. Craig, he was an incredible person. You know, it's been 8 years since he was taken from us. He was from Spokane. He had a cabin in North Idaho up at Priest Lake, and he was in several bands, Citizen Swing, and then he made it kind of big in Mayfield 4. And he was just a wonderful, great person. And when he was killed, it shook our whole family to the core. It shook our children, my wife, myself. It has caused a rift with family members. And it affects you for a long time. I'm so grateful that I have such a strong wife that helped me through it. And even after all these years, you still get emotional about it. It doesn't go away. You're able to kind of push it down a little bit, but it's always there. And because of that, it made me want to work with families that have gone through the same thing, because when there's an officer-involved shooting and their loved one has been killed, everybody looks at them differently. There's not that compassion for that family. There's blame being pushed towards that family. And that family just wants answers. And there's so much hurt there. And they didn't do anything wrong. Their loved one was taken from them. They loved that child. That child was their baby. That child was their brother, their sister. And helping people get through that is so important, but our community forgets about that. And the narrative that gets pushed out just makes it even harder for them, because it makes them feel like they did something wrong. So losing Craig has helped me find more compassion for our community and wanting to find answers, but that pain never goes away.
And I just want to expand on this a little bit more. What are holidays like for y'all? You impacted families. What what kind of things do you have to prepare yourself for when these holidays come around? And what was your loved one's holiday that they loved?
For us, it's the 4th of July. 4th of July was David's favorite holiday. Um, we have a big family. David didn't have any children, but he had a lot of nieces and nephews. And yeah, he was a lot of fun. And we really, really miss him. And he liked fireworks. Yeah, it just was a really big holiday, and you're right. It's just as a mother, and I'm sure Jim and Cynthia can attest to this as well. On holidays, especially right after the death, you put on the smile and you act like everything's okay, and everything's not okay.
So I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I'm going to put the chief on the hot seat for a moment. What's it like for an officer? What's an officer and their family going through during an officer-involved shooting? What is that like?
Well, I can say I've been very fortunate, and I haven't been involved in a critical incident or deadly use of force in the over 33 years I've been doing this. But I have investigated many of these events, and I've supervised officers who have been involved in these events. And while it is not nearly as tragic as losing a loved one, there is still suffering there. There's still fear. There's still a lot of wonder and second guessing. Did I do the right thing? Did I act too fast? Did I not act fast enough? There's a lot of those kinds of emotions going on. And quite frankly, I know officers who simply decided the career wasn't for them after a critical incident. And other officers, they come back and, well, you think they're fine, but you're never quite sure. And there's a lot of follow-up and checking up on them and making sure that they're taking care of their own wellness and behavioral health. But it impacts them and impacts their family. In many cases, there's almost always litigation, so this goes on and on and on. Once again, not like the impacted survivors here, which is a lifetime, but there is that as well.
And if you could quickly talk about, what the mental health component of how officers receive help during that time, what is that like for officers?
Sure, I'll talk about that, but then I want to add something on the end here. It's grown over the years. So when I first started in this industry, you essentially got 3 days off, a pat on the back, and you're back at work. You didn't see a psychologist. You didn't get any kind of debriefing. You got very little of any kind of support. It was essentially suck it up, buttercup. That's part of the job. It has evolved to the point now where we often engage the employee, the affected employee, multiple times over a couple of week period that they have off. On admin leave, they see a clinician, they see our peer support team. They get far more support than they ever have in the past. But what I wanted to follow up on that, and this has always sort of bugged me. Earlier this year, we had, unfortunately, an officer-involved shooting. The individual did not pass away, thankfully, but there were 2 children in the home when that occurred. And the day after, I asked my staff, let's make sure we offer the kids any kind of support they have, and ensure that they're taken care of. I was told we couldn't do that. It's against the protocol. So I asked them, well, let's go to the investigative agency and make the same request to them, make sure that the kids have the opportunity to see somebody free of charge. I'll pay for it. And we were told, no, that's not going to happen. So my point in saying that is we understand that this impacts everybody. Even when there's not a death, it's a traumatic, violent event, and we want to make sure everybody is taken care of. But there are processes in place that need some modification, that need some reform, particularly for the care of folks who are involved in these, not just police officers, not just survivors.
And thank you for that, Chief. That gave a lot of insight. Let's. Does anybody else want to touch on how has an officer-involved fatality affected you, your family, or your community personally or emotionally?
These things. Yeah, so, I mean, I've been around this work for more than a minute, and I know everybody here, with the exception of Chief Hall, because he just got here, really, but been around you long enough to start getting a good read on you. And, I can tell you that for me, as just Joe, human being, and actually, I'm a justice-involved individual. I identify as that. I did my time 1984 through 1987 for a strong-arm robbery that I committed while I was crack cocaine addicted and gunshot wounded. And so there's a really, really long list of things that I'm involved in, and these guys only touched on a few of them. And the reason for that is because that's how this has impacted my life. Because I could not sit by anymore and watch it on TV and hear about it in the news and know that in the center of my being, at the core of my soul, that all I was trying to do was keep my head down, get mine, and just make it through whatever, the day, the year. It's just not good enough. So I'm really compelled to share that this kind of thing that's occurring in our human family, and had this conversation for many years, call it conversations on both sides of the badge. It is a really, really gnarly human issue. And we have got to start figuring out, because when you look at this job, it's a wild job. And I've looked. And yet when you look at what some of the impacts of some of the things that we'll be talking about, lack of accountability and need for accountability, support, trauma, all that kind of stuff, what's happening in community many times is not a whole lot better. And so we have, and when I say community, I'm saying outside of, on the other side of the badge, but the reality is this is human stuff. And we have got to start really deeply wrestling with that real truth about the responsibility that we have as a holistic human family to start figuring this thing out. Because for me and people like us, this is not good enough. Where we're at right now is not enough. And I will not carry on the legacy of whatever that is I pass on to my children with and be able to pass that on with a clear conscience, where they know that I knew how bad it was and just did this much or this much, or I did it for a little while. And yeah, I was an advocate for 2 years. Woo! No, it's not enough. And so we all kind of start really, as many of us are in this room, really start wrestling with and getting deep into what this thing really is about. It's never going to be good enough. It's never going to be enough. We've got a long ways to go, and I'll stop with this, that they talk about this in the 7 generational thinking, right? So 7 generations behind, 7 generations ahead. Sometimes some of the teaching is 3 behind, the generation that you're in, and the 3 coming after. And if we can at least start really grasping that and the truth about where we're at and trying to have a very real humanizing impact on the problems that we are facing on all sides of the badge, we're going to keep having to face the same problem over and over again. And then that's the legacy we'll be passing on to our children. And I will not do that anymore. That's why I'm here.
Thank you for that. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question. Justice, you want to take that for me?
What do you believe are the key factors that contribute to fatal encounters between police officers and community members? Whoever wants to take that one, feel free.
When I look at officer-involved shootings, one of the things that I see is people rushing into a situation, and they might not have all the information they need to deal with the situation. And in basic law enforcement academy, BLEA, they teach you about de-escalation with the 4 components of distance, time, cover, communication. And that is so important. And a lot of times when I review officer-involved shootings, I see at least one of those components missing, that if we would have slowed down, if we would have communicated, if we would have kept that distance, if we would have had some cover, things might have gone differently. But I see a lot of times in these situations where officers show up, they're amped up, they don't know what they're going into because they don't have all the information fed to them, or they misunderstood what was happening. They rush it, they don't communicate, and then you end up with an officer-involved shooting. And I think that's some of the things that just needs to happen, is remembering those 4 components and slow down.
Bart, did you want to follow up on that?
No, I definitely agree with that. De-escalation is certainly part of it, but it's just part of it. You look at how we interact with people that disagree with us anymore in America, and it's pretty intense, especially if you want to go into politics or something like that. We don't know how to communicate with each other well. So when I think about policing and I think about officer-involved shootings, how they communicate is very, very important, especially when they are going into something that they don't know. And frankly, they're probably a little or a lot afraid of what's going in there, of what's going to happen. There's a lot of screaming, there's a lot of yelling, and there's not a lot of tolerance for anything but exactly what I told you to do. And there just has to be a little bit of balance in there. Well, a lot of balance, right? But you look at, what does a police department look like now as compared to 25 years ago or 40 years ago? The militarization of policing, some aspects looks like what I was riding around in Iraq. It's different here. That's not our function. So there's some of that. There's policy and training that can be part of it. But honestly, it can be a culture. Way back when, and one of the reasons why I've stayed in this job is we just came out of a deadly force review board. We were talking about a specific shooting, and I asked a question to a lieutenant. He said, "Yeah, we have 4 or 5 shootings every year. It's just going to happen." That was right after an officer-involved shooting. So trying to put the person behind the critical incident and recognize that is a real person. It's not just we're going to have 4 shootings. That's 4 or 5 impacted lives with all the people that are connected to them. And it has to matter. We have to care about that. So sometimes that lack of empathy and kind of just matter-of-factness, you can get used to things being hard in policing, and they face real things all the time. But it still has to matter. Everything has to matter. So that culture is so important. And I think also we don't find out about information regarding shootings for years. How are we supposed to respond to them
quickly. So there's very little information, which means there's very little deterrence out there. Our prosecutor has essentially, I don't like to use the term justified, but they like to use that term, justified every shooting. Are there consequences for that? And are we making changes? So even if it's justified, did it have to happen? I mean, we really have to believe that we can make a difference in this line of work, and we have to believe that we shouldn't be on mapping police violence, except maybe way at the bottom. You know, I think back to what you were talking about, Anwar, a little bit, when the sheriff and the chief came out and they said, that's just bad math. No, that's shooting people, right? That's why we're on that list. And 75 people since 1994 is an awful lot. So there's just a lot of reasons. I think I've said a lot.
Thank you so much. Would anybody else like to follow up on that?
All right. So I agree with everything that was just said, and just to sort of add on to that, I think what Bart was referring to is sometimes we forget in both policy and training and how we move the policing industry forward is the sanctity of human life, and that is at the top of the pyramid. And understanding that regardless of what got us to that particular point in time, the sanctity of human life is and should be our guiding light. And to, you know, once again, to what Bart said is, and that means we slow down, we take more time, we use our critical decision-making skills. For a long time in policing, and particularly I have some background in SWAT, it was all about speed and this term called violence of action. They've finally pulled back from that and understood that maybe that wasn't the way to go. And maybe taking more time, understanding that you have discretionary time to make decisions, even if it's just 2 or 3 seconds, to decide this is not a great tactical position, we're gonna back up. And by the way, you have to teach cops to back up. They're not used to retreating. We call it tactical egress. That's better. But you actually have to teach that. We, and when I say we, I mean law enforcement executives are to blame for that and for the training that led down that road. And now we're trying to pull back from it and give them more time and space and tools to make the decisions that they need to make and know that it's okay to back up. And then the last thing I'd say to you know what obviously one of my lieutenants said, unfortunately, was what they hear from me almost on a daily basis is what we're doing right now isn't good enough. We always have to do better. We always have to learn. We always have to have that intellectual humility as a foundational sort of keystone so that we can get better every single day. We have to be better today than we were yesterday. And that's got to be how we attack this problem, and this is a problem.
Yeah, I'll make it real fast. So, yeah, and I just want a couple of things that I want to point out as I kind of get to my statement is that, you know, this is the relaunch of this conversation, right? So the NAACP, in collaboration with the Human Rights Commission, the Ombudsman Office, SPD, we had not the governor's office, we had a representative from the governor's office, OII was in the room and everything, and we did this, you know, a couple months ago, and as a precursor to set this in motion. And so, and that kind of is the segue to what I'm going to say, in that the issue is culture. The issue is what kind of culture do we have rocking around in our human family and in this industry that has set up these dynamics. And I appreciated what you're saying, what you just said, Chief, about the responsibility of overhead to, you know, to shift that. And, you know, that's a big battle that the Criminal Justice Training Commission is in the midst of right now, is trying to do and bring in these new processes and crop of human beings into the industry to try to shift the culture that was never at its onset, never set up for the marginalized or the poor or the impoverished. That is not how law enforcement got set in motion in this country. And we have just got to understand that a lot of the things that stem from that and have been added to that along the pathway to where we're at today have a real basis in the fact of why this industry even got started. And until we start taking a real serious look at not only the things that we're doing and the things that we need to do better, but we also got to take a look at why this thing is. Why was this created? Why is there a need? What are we really trying to look to do? And then how do we compare that to what we've been doing? And I say we because this is a human issue. These are not other people over there. These are people that are doing a really, really tough job. And they're dealing with a lot of people that are having a really, really hard time. And so now what do we do with that other than what we've been doing that has this very long list? And I will say this last, and I will stop, is that the T word, it's trauma. We have got trauma rocking and rolling all over the place in this, and we are not dealing with it well.
So let's move on to our next question. How can we balance public safety with individual rights in over-policed communities? And what non-policing solutions, like mental health services or restorative justice, could reduce the need for force? Who wants to jump at that one? Let- It's a long question, I know.
All right. Well, I think a lot of it comes down to how we see people and who we value. When we look at public safety, a lot of times we look at other people and we think about whether they're a danger to us or not, and not what are they going through and what can we do to help them with what they're going through. We see that a lot of times it starts at a very young age. And as a community, we need to start working with people at a very young age. We need to help them if they're having mental health issues. We need to make mental health access easier for people to get access to. We need to make it where it's not something to be embarrassed about. When Craig was killed, I was going through some really hard times. I was losing it. And my wife, Kim, I mean, she was amazing. She said, if you don't go to the VA and talk to somebody, I'm going to call them for you. It was amazing. It was the best thing she could have said, because I went out to the VA and started talking to somebody. And it helps so much. But not everybody has that access. I'm lucky that I have that access. We need to give that access to more people. And it doesn't have to be just over huge trauma. It can be through over daily lives, because we all have issues in our daily lives that we struggle with, but we don't have access to that type of health care. And we need to acknowledge that people are going through that. So when people encounter law enforcement or law enforcement encounter people, that's one of the things we need to take in consideration. What is that person going through on both sides? And again, it comes down to slowing down and communicating. But I think that's a huge step, and starting when it's young. So access and working with youth.
Absolutely. I'm going to put somebody on the hot seat here. Cynthia, you've got a background in mental health services. Can you talk about what it might look like with mental health services and police being more engaged in our community? What might you like to see?
Well, I'm actually a substance use disorder professional. So, a counselor, the training's a little bit different. I believe it would be incredibly valuable to have more, there is a team of mental health folks that go out with police officers to try and help people in a crisis, but it is such a small team, is my understanding, that given the given the trauma, given the difficulties people have, we are not a small town of like 500 people here. We need a lot more. We need a bigger team, absolutely, a much bigger team with some really good oversight, so that as they go along, they're of course always learning and growing and making that the best team that it could be for the community. And I think it's, we really have to look at the stigma that's behind needing mental health. There can be a lot of stigma, and that's part of the problem. So when we talk about we need a bigger team, how it doesn't come, just like magically. Of course, somebody has to value it or not value it, and those people are the people running our city, our state, federal. All those money streams, they're not going to that team, very much at all. And so we have to take a look at that. Can we as a community say to our, call them and say to our representatives, this is important. People are suffering, and we need that safety net to catch them, because when they're suffering, the next person is suffering, and the next person is suffering. We share. We human beings are good at sharing, and that's, in a sense, as it should be. We're a community. We have to share the burden and share the responsibility and be there for our neighbors and our family, and in turn have that there for us, because there's nobody that has not suffered or will not in the future have some suffering. We need that safety net. We need it to be there for us.
Thank you for that. Chief, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the behavioral health unit that the department has, and what kind of services that team offers, and how that team works in our community.
Sure. So the behavioral health unit, they are considered co-responders. They work closely with clinicians, and they go out and they follow up on calls that are referred to them by both the community and other officers for cases where they believe that there's a behavioral health nexus as opposed to a criminal nexus. They also do most of our petitions or orders for involuntary treatment, and they've become extraordinarily successful in doing that without using force. I will add, though, these units became very popular across the nation at least a decade ago or so, but it's another sort of symptom of they came about because there was a need and there was no other funding mechanism for that need except for law enforcement to do it. I would submit it's not the best fit for law enforcement, and I would even go back to an earlier question and say, I often wonder, why are we there in the first place? Why is this a law enforcement issue? And that goes to a whole other systemic sort of reform that a lot of people overlook, and that's the 911 system that has hardly been touched when we talk about reform and changing systems. The true gateway into the criminal justice system is the 911 system. So I would say we really need to go that far back and look at, why are we receiving these calls? Why isn't there someone else to take a lot of these calls that are not appropriate for law enforcement to go to? And instead, what we did is what law enforcement does is we figured out, well, this is a problem, nobody else is fixing it, so let's try this. And we came up with co-responders. I would love to see civilian clinician teams that go out and they're completely eliminate the need for armed law enforcement officers to go to many of these calls.
With that, can you answer on what do the current non-policing solutions look like, and how do they interact with law enforcement?
There is a mobile crisis team. They will go out, but they won't go out if there's even an inkling of a firearm, previous violence, if the individual has a well-constructed plan for self-harm. So there's a lot of criteria based on that. So, and I'm not sure there's a lot of evidence to support that. I think that we have just become the default, and for a lot of people, mental illness and behavioral health issues are really scary when somebody's acting somewhat irrationally, when in fact, for the most part, they're not violent, they're not a danger to anybody, and a well-trained clinician or even peer support can do a really good job of stabilizing and getting them into treatment.
So my question was, how do you see these other things outside the behavioral health unit? Like what other non-policing agencies, or how are things handled if people are going through crisis currently?
Outside of policing?
Yes.
I have far less experience in that arena, but I can tell you in a previous life, in another city, there were 17 civilian co-response, mobile crisis teams, and 60% of their calls had zero involvement with law enforcement. So 60% of the calls they went out to, we never saw on our board, never became a 911 call. They operated completely independent of us. They had police radios if they needed help. They never needed help. That model has been in or around for almost 20 years.
I think you are an expert on the 911 thing, so that did answer the question. Thank you.
Okay, so let's yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I really appreciate what you just said, and you know the to me what you just named was the culture, right? The culture dynamic, some of the cultural issue. Why is this the default? Where does that default come from? How did that default come into origin? Are we even having a conversation in general, you know, beyond a, you know, once a year panel or once every 5-year panel that has a conversation about, oh, hey, you know, maybe it's a cultural issue, you know, and I think that's also some of the cultural problem, because what we have kind of done as an American society have gotten like over into this other thing where it's like, okay, well, that's their problem. Well, if it's their problem, then that means that's something I'm not probably willing to deal with, which means that I'm not willing to get involved, which means that I really don't want to deal with it at all. And that all of a sudden makes this now a us versus them issue, or an us and them issue, which now starts putting somebody in the category, including the people responding to this, in the category of either more deserving, less deserving, under-deserving, or not deserving at all. And when you take a look at what continues to happen in the industry on both sides of the badge, well, they're the enemy, they're the dehumanized one, they're the inhuman one, they're the over-deserving one, they're the under-deserving one, and, you know, and it just, the ball just keeps rolling. And so there's this real invitation to come to terms with the fact that this is a cultural problem. And we have always had some of the mechanisms for the solutions to this. We've just been unwilling to put our money where our mouths are. We say we care about humanity. We say that we have legislators that say they care about this kind of stuff. But are they pouring money into these proven mechanisms that have evidence-based success? Are they willing to do that beyond a pilot project? Because that's what we have in Spokane, are a bunch of pilot projects. Okay, and that's all. There's part of the cultural problem again. So we just really got to kind of look at that and name that, especially in light of you have experts that are sitting here telling you it works. And I'm gonna say one more thing before I get off this horse, and that's that every law enforcement involved issue, every 911 call is a crisis. Do you get that? In other words, the people are not doing okay. In other words, they're probably having a mental health crisis. Okay? And even if they're extremely violent and the end result of that crisis is extreme violence, it's still a mental health crisis. Do you get that? And are we as a society really kind of wrapping ourselves around that? Or are we going, well, okay, that person is too violent because of whatever reason. I was one of those people. I was too violent for a time. But you know what I had? I had 10 aces and years of drug abuse. Of course I was violent. What do you think that does to a person? And then I come to law enforcement, and they're treating me like I'm some kind of like other than human thing. Last thing I'm going to say, and then I will put the mic down, is that dehumanizing thing is at play. But also bringing it back to the origin of the industry and the reality that we're in right now as an American society, race is a freaking issue. People of color are disproportionately, even in that long list that you look over the United States right now, one thing I want to say about the mapping police violence is they're pulling from FBI statistics. Okay, they're not just making these numbers up. Okay, so that's one point. The other point is, according to some of those statistics, there are places in the United States right now today that are killing black and brown human beings at 16 times the rate of their white counterparts. I am not okay with that. You shouldn't be either.
Yeah, absolutely.
A couple of things that have just come up in the last few minutes that are concerning to me, or questions I have. I have a question for you, Chief Hall. The behavioral health unit, is it true that it's Monday through Friday, like 8 to 4? Is that correct? Okay, so that right there in itself is a problem. So I guess I really wanted to bring up some specifics. And then the money part of it, boy, what a big concern that is, because there is a lot of data and history out there, and that would be Ernie and Joe in San Antonio, Texas, a behavioral health unit that was proven to be very successful. And when San Antonio ran this behavioral health unit with 2 commissioned police officers, but they would show up in non-uniform because it's a form of de-escalation to not show up in uniform. They were very successful. I believe there was only one incident that they had that didn't go right. Yeah, I think there was only one, and they had done this for years. So when you look at the lawsuits, and I mean, for me, it's the damage, you know, it's just the damage that's done to your family, your loved one's gone. But for these cities and these towns to look at the dollar point of it, it just doesn't make any sense. That's the cat chasing its tail. You're going to save lives and you're going to save money. You're going to save money by having a stepped up behavioral health response of some kind. And hopefully Spokane will get one that's beyond Monday through Friday from 8 to 4. Thank you.
All right. So our next question for the panelists is, what changes would you like to see in how officer-involved fatalities and excessive force, use of force cases are investigated, as well as how they're communicated to the public?
You know, when there's an officer-involved shooting, I think the first thing we need to see is just honesty. When the press release comes out, it's worded in a certain way that continues to do harm to the families, and we need to change that, because as we go through the incident reports and the body cam, we start learning there's more to it than what actually came out. In some cases, it's not an officer guided somebody to the ground, it's the officer picked them up and threw her to the ground, shattering her shoulder. We need to be honest about that, because it will come out eventually. The records do come out. And when they do, that information gets out there. Unfortunately, the damage has already been done because we haven't been honest about what happened. That honesty, I think, will also play into the next part What can we learn from an officer-involved shooting? What can we do to change policy and training to ensure that doesn't happen again? And I'm not privy to policy changes or training. I don't know what happens after that. But from the community, we don't see, after an officer-involved shooting, we don't see anyone come out and say, you know what, because of this, we're changing this. It might be happening, but the community's not hearing it. And we do need to know that if it is happening, and if it isn't, it has to happen. When there's an officer-involved shooting, there's so much to learn from it. And there's so many lives that can be changed if we take the time to change what took place. If we learn from those mistakes, because there are mistakes in every single one of them that we can go through and pick out. They'll sit there and tell you it's Monday morning quarterbacking, but that's important. We have to look at it. We have to point out what went wrong so we can make sure it doesn't happen again. And the other thing is, because of insurance, it seems a lot of the times, the thing that I hear from law enforcement is that they can't let certain information out, or they can't give their true feelings about what took place because their hands are tied because of money. The insurance companies are telling you, you can't let this information out. But eventually there is a lawsuit, and that money comes out anyways. So if we could just be honest and communicate what's going on with these officer-involved shootings, and then from there, make the changes that are needed to prevent them from happening in the future.
Okay. I had thought that or my experience has been that the information can't be released, or we've been told it can't be released in a fatal incident because of Initiative 940. And we haven't talked about Initiative 940 yet, and we probably need to spend a little bit of time on that. So Initiative 940 was put into place in December of 2018, and so it now is law for Washington State. And it removed the bar of malice in a officer-involved shooting, and the measurement then turned to reasonable. What would a reasonable officer have done? So also in there, it says that the family is supposed to get weekly updates when there's a fatality. And so I've heard from some people in different police departments say they can't give any additional information besides these weekly updates. And lots of times in the weekly update to the family, all they'll say is that there is no new information. And I do understand that a weekly update for maybe a year or 8 or 9 months might be a bit much, but there's something going on during that investigation. That family deserves an update that actually has credible information. We're doing interviews. You know, we're researching, or you know, whatever they're doing. They're doing a reenactment. They need to actually do an update. This is a respect thing. That family deserves that. And I have to commend OII, because I see that you have, I read a couple of updates that you did on some of the investigations you did over in Region 1. And I believe it's 60 days. I've seen a very nice, detailed update to that family and to the community. If OII can do it, it can be done at a local level too. So I think that's kind of some fear-mongering maybe going on there when they say we can't give an update. The way the WAC reads when I read it is that they have to get permission to give an update. And I believe they have to get permission from the IIT team. And I might be maybe getting a little bit too detailed here. But the other thing about public or notifying the family, or how press releases, for instance, are handled with families. There's a family in the room here today that when their loved one received a decision, because the prosecuting attorney is the one that makes the decision on whether charges will be pressed against a police officer. And they're required, because of Initiative 940, to now give the family that information ahead of time before it's released to the press. It's kind of crazy that we have to have so many laws for so many things. It should just be common decency that you would notify the family ahead of time. Well, this wasn't being done, and this wasn't just in Spokane, it was across the state that this was happening. So they called this family and told them that, yes, there's a press release tomorrow, and that was it. They did not tell the family what the results of that press release was. I just think that was just mean. That's just, it just shouldn't be handled that way. That's just a one for instance. And the other thing too, and I'll be quick so you can get on to somebody else, is public records, the way the WAC reads on public records when there's an investigation going on, is once the investigation is completed, the public records are to be released. They can be released. I didn't get, and the other families that I've worked with, I do a lot of work with impacted families, they're not getting the public records for 4 or 5 months, even longer after the investigation's been completed. The measurement of when an investigation is completed is when it's delivered to the prosecuting attorney. So the IIT team finishes their investigation, they turn it over to the prosecuting attorney. At that point, those public records should be released. And that's not happening. And I can't tell you guys how torturous it is for a family to not have that information. You don't know whether to take up for your loved one or to not take up for your loved one. You don't know what happened. You just don't know. So that needs to stop. And the law is written that those records are to be released once it's been delivered to the prosecuting attorney, because then it goes on the prosecuting attorney's desk and it sits there for another 3, 4, 5 months. So.
And with that, when we're talking about communicating to the public, Chief, you did something interesting recently when you started releasing portions of body camera footage. You want to talk about your decision on that and why you felt that was important?
Well, I mean, first of all, I agree with Debbie, and we've talked about this in the past. There were a lot of things I learned about Washington State when I came up here. I thought I'd done my homework, but apparently not nearly as much. Washington State regulates a lot of things that are not regulated in other states, and one of them surrounds this issue of critical incidents and officer-involved shootings. And what Debbie just described is true. There's this perception that nothing can be released until the investigation is complete because it protects the integrity of the investigation. I'm used to having to prove why the integrity of the investigation would be compromised if the information is released. And that, in many cases, is hard to do. So what I did recently is we created a video. I call it a contextualized video out of all of the body-worn camera. We overlaid the 911 calls and presented that to the officers first who were involved, and then we invited the family to come in to view it as well, which they did, and then we released it. So all of the involved people got to see this before anybody else got to see it and provide input on what they wanted to be pushed out, even though they knew the raw footage was available for public records. But what we created, this contextualized video, they were able to give their feedback on what they wanted in there and what they didn't. And I think we're going to continue doing this because I think there's some cathartic sort of not closure, but it helps them understand. And we had a clinician in there with them. We had a victim advocate in there with them. And for the officers, we had our PAT team or our peer assistance team in there with them because they're reliving the trauma. But it's important. It's important to the survivors. It's important to the officers to see this first, to understand that they have the opportunity to see this first. I think we're going to continue doing that in the future, hopefully not very often. Going back to what Bart said earlier, I keep thinking about this because it's one of my lieutenants who said it, and he's not going to tell me who. But we can't be satisfied with, well, we're going to have 4 or 5 of these every year. We got to say, no, we're going to have 4, and then we're going to have 3, and then we're going to have 2, and then we're going to have none. And that's got to be the goal. But we also have to treat the survivors with respect. And that's why I did that. I would like to do it much sooner, and I'm working towards that, but I'm working through the SEER protocol, the independent investigative protocol, along with the WACs and along with our legal folks, so that we can start releasing stuff sooner. I'm used to releasing body-worn camera footage in 3 weeks.
I do want to point out that the Spokane County Sheriff's Office is not doing that at all. And I want to point out that we talk about updates on officer-involved shootings. The Spokane County Sheriff's Office isn't even giving updates to families of loved ones who have been murdered. I know of one family who's been calling every week or every 2 weeks for an update on the investigation of their loved one who was murdered, and the detective refuses to speak to the family at all. And this is at the Spokane County Sheriff's Office. The detective won't let him know what he might be waiting on, where the investigation might be at, or even just to say, hey, I know you're eager to find out what happened, but I can't say anything. And that is just a disservice to everyone. So the Spokane County Sheriff's Office needs to step up big time, and it would be nice if the sheriff would at least step up to this stage someday.
Well, I know you all probably have a lot of questions as well. You have note cards near your chair or on your chair previously. If you can bring those, or we will come collect them in between this question and the next. So you can ask more in-depth questions about maybe of something you've heard. The next question we have for our panelists, though, is what role should transparency and public oversight play in preventing future excessive use of force cases and or officer-involved fatalities?
I think that one's for me. Yeah, well, there's a lot of things in that. When I think about our system that we have here, we do have decent access in regards to complaints. But what's interesting in Spokane, we have the least amount of access to the things that the public cares about the most. I don't find out about the uses of force until after the fact, after the chain of command review, when it starts to go to a review board. So I think that's at least a place. And we have a seat at the table. We used to only have a seat to observe. Now we have a participating seat at the table. We used to not be able to write reports, and now we can write reports and we make recommendations. But the problem is there's all this contract language and bureaucracy around what we can say. Still struggle with folks thinking that we should be able to have our opinions in reports on what went right or what went wrong. We should have a voice. If you have an oversight entity that has access and they're professionals, we should have a voice of whether we think something's right or wrong. I'm not on the inside, I'm on the outside, I'm gonna call it as it is. And we do that through reports, but we have to do it in a vague manner, where it can be pretty difficult to, well, it's not difficult. We try to write it in a way in which you'll figure out how we think, but we shouldn't have to dance around it. If there's something that should be improved, we should say it and it should be improved. So we should have a pretty straightforward, formal way to take access. And we actually did that this year. And with the chief, I just want to highlight that we did take a case, which we found out now. We found out about it long after the fact, but we wrote a report and we did raise a stink inside of the police department. And it was consistent and ongoing. And we changed the review boards up. We changed a little bit of policy. We changed membership of the review boards. We changed the focus of the review boards. You have to care about it. So we have to care about it a lot. We were able to change the focus, and I think on reducing force. When we have a review board and all we talk about is whether the officer's actions were reasonable. Well, that decision is made by the chain of command prior to it coming to the review board. That decision's already done. So the review board should be everything about, did this force have to occur? Was there anything else that we could have done to avoid this? So you take that conversation outside of that, and if the answer is yes, are our officers trained? Are they equipped? Do they get that feedback? Are we going to actually put that into practice? And really push towards, did it have to occur? And if there's a way that we could have avoided it, we need to try to do that. So I think that's the role of oversight.
I really appreciate what you just named too. I won't even try to repeat it, but I'm going to use a couple of references that I have. And so just a couple of things real quick. So one, I was a firefighter for over a decade, so I just want to let you know I'm also coming into the room from that angle and in this conversation. The other one is also a truck driver. And one of the things that, one guy was just a beast, my trainer. And on retrospect, after I got through the training, he was absolutely racist, right? Just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And he taught me how to drive. So got through the racism, didn't get in an accident, but one of the things he told me was that every accident is avoidable. You have to approach every single situation, any accident you have, as if you could have avoided it, and you have the ability to avoid it. And to be honest with you, I haven't gotten in one since. Because, and I'm talking, have you seen Spokane drivers? Okay, it's wild out here, man. And you know, so, and I let some of you drivers out there know that that was not okay too, because I'm the guy that will stop at the stoplight, roll down my window, and tell you what I thought about what you just did. So, you know, what I really wanted to also name that, but also circle back to the, you know, what changes would we like to see? We've got and have been pushing for bills in legislation for a very long time, and the fact that I have to say for a very long time tells you part of the problem. We have gotten some stuff passed. These fine people in this room, Roger Rokoff and the team, Hector, everyone, they are part of that, of the results of some real hard push by the WCPA and community members all across the state and organizations across the state. And the fact that there was a very real, can't not look at it anymore, loss of life that people have been talking about their treatment about people of color under law enforcement the entire time. So I'm speaking about George Floyd. Well, then we got something done. But you know what? It was still happening. Before George Floyd, it's still happening today. Do you know that? Okay? So when we're looking at what needs to happen now, besides the stuff that's already got evidence-based stuff that's already working, and you know, mental health professionals, and we've already proved it's working here in Spokane and in Washington State. But the other thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that the things that teams that were already put together, recommended, are followed through on. The Office of Independent Investigation, okay? Or the Office of the Independent Prosecutor, okay? We have the Sheriff's and Marshal's bill. We have sheriffs, speaking of sheriffs, the one that was also invited the last time we did this and got crickets again, and who's dancing like you just named out. And by the way, I will throw this little thing out there too. One of the things that his predecessor did was put people like Anwar and myself and Walter Kendricks up on blast and said, these guys, you want to talk about a dog whistle target? I mean, that's the dance we've got going on in that part of Spokane law enforcement. So that, you know, what we need to do is we need to get this legislation passed, and we need you to make sure that you let your legislators know that these are important, because we have sheriffs and marshals in this state that don't have the minimum qualifications that a beat cop has. Okay? But they're in charge of that. It's like, come on. And that's one of those things, that's culture, and we can do better, and we need to do better. So the sheriff's and marshal's bill. Debbie, help me out. What's the, Jim, help me out. And we're help. Oh, the attorney, right, the attorney general bill, right? Do you know that the attorney general's office, when you hear the attorney general's office, you think, oh, okay, there's, you know, like the ultimate authority in the state. No. You know, when it comes to them looking at issues within law enforcement, I'm being very broad with that brush, they have to do the same public records request we do. Okay, but yet for some reason we're having a problem getting this bill passed. Okay, for years. And when you talk to your legislators, like, oh yeah, no, public safety. Well, really? Is that public safety? Having a sheriff that doesn't have the minimum qualifications that the police chief has or a beat cop has, or sometimes even a barber has? Come on. Let's just start having the real conversations. So those 3 bills, and then the other one is the, as you mentioned, the traffic safety for all. Okay, so wanted to make sure that those got put in the room. That's what we need to see, that and more, including, but tying it back into your last question about the transparency.
Absolutely. So we're just going to throw out our last question again. How can law enforcement create a safer outcomes for everyone during high-risk encounters? Anyone else want to touch on that before we move on to audience Q&A?
How much time do I have? Okay, I really think the research and what I've experienced is the slowing down piece of it. We've all talked about that, or to rally. When you have conversation or research what these police experts are saying, and these trainers, like over for the state for the Criminal Justice Training Center, it's the slowing down, rally. When they're trained, and I'm sure Chief Hall can talk about this better than I can, but they're trained that when a call comes in, and I did used to be a dispatcher way back a long time ago, but when a call comes in, that call is hardly ever what it comes in as. You know, so that police officer really needs to slow down. Now, sometimes they can't. We all get that. But in most situations, they can slow down. I tried to go to the Criminal Justice Training Center, and then I work with a group on complaints and so forth. But there's a trainer over there, Rich Peterson, and one thing that he said that just really stuck with me, you guys, is he said, and I think this was in the March meeting, we don't teach them when to stop using force. I've never heard anybody say that before. We don't teach them when to stop using force. So that's really something to have a conversation about. But they need to slow down, they need to rally, and yeah, we need consistency. We need consistency in our training. As far as I know, BLEA, Basic Law Enforcement Academy, there's consistency there across the state for the training. But there's a lot of training, of course, that happens beyond BLEA. And I don't believe there's consistency there, and I believe we need that consistency. And just real quick, while I have the microphone, I want to say to Chief Hall, what you did with the review boards, I commend you for that, and I think that's going to make a big difference in Spokane. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I always feel bad when I don't get my question answered, so I'm going to try to read these and answer them, and if I'm wrong about anything, let me know. How are racial demographics collected? Are they self-reported or assumed? I'm assuming if they're dead, they're not going to be self-reported, but when I was in jail, I was self-reporting everything. So I do ask, is it assumed when somebody dies what their racial demographics are? It's both. Okay, thank you. Why don't officers get instantly charged with murder when they murder an unarmed suspect? Why aren't officers charged with murder if they kill someone who's unarmed? Is deadly use of force even justifiable, or is that your stance that deadly force should never be used under any circumstance?
both of those are codified into the statutes of Washington State. So I mean,
Thank you. Yep, a lot of just trying to get through them. Sorry.
On the charges, that's one of the things that comes down to the prosecutor, and you have to look at the prosecutor, what the prosecutor's looking at. And in Spokane County, I don't know if Prosecutor Haskell really looked at much, but he always ruled justified, and I don't think he really took a deep dive into what took place.
But can I just say that it is a homicide investigation. So the investigation that's happening is a homicide investigation. So it is being scrutinized at that level. It's just up to the prosecutor to bring those charges or not.
So important to add in there, but that it's a homicide investigation, at least here, being done by, the agency next door. Right? Yeah, as it currently sits. So they, essentially what we've got is some imaginary line between Spokane Valley and Spokane proper, or Spokane City, that all on the other side of that imaginary line, you all get to investigate the thing that we just did, and vice versa. And, I mean, what are the results we keep getting?
What is that? Who's that team composed of, and what is their acronym?
SEER?
It's SIIR, right?
It's, yeah, Spokane Investigative.
And who makes up that investigative team?
all of the local agencies.
If you could list them out for us.
County, Spokane City, Airway, Spokane Valley, Airway Heights, Cheney. Washington State Patrol.
Wow. Our commission school officers / deputies subject to the same investigation of oversight for use of force that occurs in schools. One more time. Are resource officers subject to the same investigation or oversight for use of force that occurs in schools?
If we had officers in schools, yes.
Were the officers who were shown the body cam footage first able to give feedback? If so, did that change the final product that was shown to the impacted families?
They were able to give feedback, but no changes were made based on their feedback.
When will the OII be up and running in Spokane? I guess that's maybe for y'all.
You want me to run this down to you?
No answer on that one. Okay. I had just. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Roger Rogoff. I'm the director of the Office of Independent Investigations. We are open and active in Region 1, which is Southwest Washington and the Olympic Peninsula. We are working toward being active and investigating new cases all over the state. We can only do that when we have the resources available to do that. And when we have the resources in this area, as well as every other area in Washington, we will immediately be open and doing the work. I can't give you a timeline because I'm not in control of those resources.
I'm going to change somebody's question, and this is the last question I'm able to read. What regulations, laws, state, federal, and city could the people advocate for to make a change for some of the issues that we have? What, repeat it one more time?
I would say the most pressing one is what we call the OIP bill, the Office of Independent Prosecution. So instead of having a local prosecutor in Spokane, there would be a state level prosecuting attorney that would make decisions. It is an inherent conflict of interest for a local prosecutor to be making these decisions, whether it's here in Spokane or another county or another state. It's just been proven time and time again. I really don't feel like I even need to explain it or spend any time on it. You know, it's just an obvious conflict of interest. And this also, everybody's talking about the budget right now, budget smudget. It would be a cost savings for that to be moved to a state level agency, to Spokane or to any of these other counties. It would be a cost savings. It's going to build trust in the community. It's going to bring transparency, and it's going to bring accountability. OII was put together and meant to work in conjunction and side by side with the OIP bill, the Office of Independent Prosecution. So it kind of, I can't say defeats the purpose. They were meant to work together. We were meant to have OII do investigations at a state level, and it was meant, and this is what the people approved and asked for. This is what the community and the people wanted. They want independence in these decisions. So the OIP bill, the AGO bill, just real quickly, the Attorney General Office, we're really working hard on that right now. But the Department of Justice, due to what's going on in the political arena right now, they're not opening up any new cases. They're shutting down all the cases. So they're a federal agency. We want our Attorney General Office here in Spokane to have the tools that they need to do their work for police departments here. And they just don't have, I'm trying to think of the right word, they just don't have what they need to be able to do that. And the resources, right? Because again, they have to apply for public records just like I would have to apply. I remember when the Ombuds office went through that. It was horrible. You know, it's very hard to get public records. There has been quite a bit of money that has been approved this last legislative session for a, what was it called, a safety grant, a public safety grant for the state of Washington. Some people referred to it as Ferguson's $100 million bill, but 2015, right, House Bill 2015. We're not supposed to call it that. He doesn't like us to call it that. So anyway, it's a public safety grant. I pulled the records on that. That grant is estimated over the next 6 years to come to $1,363 million. So it's kind of frustrating to me to get the OIP bill turned down, which came to $4.2 million. So it's about this much of this much. You know, it's a very small amount. So, and again, it's like the cat chasing its tail. If we can get some of these guardrails and some of these systems put into place, we're going to see changes for the better. We're going to see lives saved. So,
Hey, there's one thing on that too. I just want to riff off Deb a little bit that we did not mention yet, and that's that you do realize that while this is a whole budget dance, and this actually being a very small part of that very big number that's being pushed into this industry, that in similitude, simultaneously, what's happening is millions and millions of dollars are going out of the pockets of the city and county, paying off lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit on the issues that we're talking about. So again, it's the culture thing. And the other thing I want to say, and I'm just going to speak on behalf, because I've been around impacted families for more than a minute at this level, is what do you think it says to them that you're not willing to hold the person that did this thing accountable, but you're willing to give me a bunch of money? So now you just took my loved one and summed them up in the format of some fictitious thing that we made up as a country to be able to exchange goods. So in other words, I would postulate that what you just did was also further dehumanize and devalue the loved one that I have lost due to this unnecessary and horribly violent issue that continues to occur in this thing, while simultaneously being willing to not put money into changing it or laws into changing it, at the same time not holding the people accountable that did it. So again, it's a culture. I hope you didn't mind me speaking on your behalf that way.
So with that, we're going to start closing out. We're going to have some closing statements from y'all. So if we could, if we can go down the line and start with Bart, give us your impressions. Give us what you want us to hold on to. Give it to us.
And
We're
that one
ready.
wasn't on the list. Closing statements. I'll do a shameless plug. If you could help us out in Spokane and ask the city council to help us on the next collective bargaining agreement to get rid of some of these restrictions on my office, that would be really helpful. I feel like I can stand behind my opinion, and sometimes the police will like it and sometimes they won't. That's the way it should be. But there is a layer of bureaucracy in regards to these officer-involved shootings, uses of force, oversight in general, that is very difficult to penetrate. I would love to see, and I say it every time OII is in the room, hey, you got to get us the information faster, please. Especially if there are things which we could and probably should be changing in our police department based on a critical incident. We need to know that sooner than a year. I think putting officers back on the streets before we have that clarity is also a cultural issue. The officers that we're hiring to bring in to serve our community, a little bit more clarity on their backgrounds and the violence that they may have been involved with before they got here. I like what Washington's doing in regards to police decertification and keeping those officers off the streets that should not be on there. I think training, you know, when we talk at the CJTC, we talk about the basic law enforcement academy training, and then they're really good at the decertification when you can no longer be a police officer anymore. There's like a 30-plus year time span in the middle of that. And there are a lot of chances for accountability along the way, which we should be doing and raising the standards for our police officers in Washington State. That's Bart Loke's opinion. I do not speak on behalf of the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission, just in case anyone's listening. Because really, we should be about having our police officers have that full, robust career from start to finish, without lawsuits, without loss of life, all those things, that they could enjoy their chosen profession for a long time. But the accountability systems have to keep them in line along the way, and they have to, and we need to keep raising the bar. There's just no reason why we don't have access to instant information. If you dial Domino's right now, they'll tell you exactly where your pizza is all along the way. But you can't find anything out about an investigation that's ongoing. I think we can do better.
One of the things that I have trouble with is that when I talk with law enforcement officers that are retired, law enforcement officers that have had long careers, one of the things that they say is that drawing your weapon is rare. Firing it is even rarer. And when I see that we have officers in our community who have not just shot one person, but in some cases more than 5 people, that should send out a big red flag. And we really need to consider whether or not that person should still be in charge of handling a firearm anymore. Whether or not they were justified in doing it, if they have shot 5 people, if they have shot 3 people, if they've shot 1 person, we should be looking at that and going, okay, what's going on here and what can we do to make sure it doesn't continue? But by the time they get to shooting 5 people, why are we keeping them on the force? Because that is just wrong. You would not want to shoot 1 person. You wouldn't want to shoot 2 people, but when you're shooting multiple people, we need to do something about that. We need to remove that person from law enforcement by the time they get that high for sure. There shouldn't be an excuse for that.
So is this kind of like open forum when we're at the city council? We can just talk about whatever.
Absolutely.
For 2 minutes,
2
yeah, I'm gonna
minutes.
get time.
2 minutes.
Whenever I get the chance, and this is kind of off topic just a little bit, maybe I'm looking over here at OII. Whenever I get the chance, Roger, I'm gonna put the plug in there for Spokane. I love Spokane. This is my area. We need you. Spokane needs you. We need you over here in Region 6. There's 6 regions across the state. Currently, OII is in Region 1, which is the very far west part of the state. We're Region 6. So okay, good. Don't go in order. Spokane really, really needs you, and I think that's about it. Thank you.
I'll be brief. Everybody, I think, has heard me speak before. I just wanted to say I think it would be remiss if I didn't mention that there are times when officers need to use deadly force. There are times when my officers have been shot at, have been shot. I've had the unfortunate experience of investigating officer homicides. So there are times where deadly force is necessary. So I just wanted to get that out there. Do we need to reduce the number of shootings that occur? Absolutely. Can we reduce the number of shootings that occur? Absolutely. We take away firearms and we look at blunt objects, baseball bats, hockey sticks, this isn't Canada, but close enough, knives, that's really where we want to focus on. And I just wanted to highlight with Bart and his office's help, we're bringing in some training actually at the end of next month. It's national training. It has an evidence base. It has 2 separate evaluations showing that it reduces force by double digits, and that's called ICAT. And it's Integrating Communications Assessment and Tactics by the Police Executive Research Forum, and that'll be here next month. They'll do a train the trainers. They'll train a whole cadre of my folks, and then my folks will train the entire police department. And that's all about recognizing crisis, understanding there are different ways to handle people in crisis, different ways to handle people with sharp knives or sharp objects and blunt objects. So we are looking for all the different ways we can start reducing this. And the last thing I'll say is what OII does and what SEER does is the criminal investigation. What we have to wait for to get all of that information is to do the administrative investigation. What I often say is Graham v. Connor, which is the criminal portion of the investigation, that's the standard that the investigation is based on. That tells officers what they can do. My policy, strong policy, tells officers what they should do. And I have to wait sometimes 2 years before I can make that evaluation.
Thank you, Chief.
So I'm going to go with Bart on this too. I have not been speaking, nor am I speaking now on behalf of the Criminal Justice Training Commission, nor the commission, the Spokane Human Rights Commission. And I will say this, that that we have failed. Okay, we have failed ourselves, and we have failed this human family on the other side of the badge. Their suicide rates are off the charts. Okay, look at the 2020 report to the Senate, okay, on suicide rates. It's one of the top 5 of lifelong careers, as far as if not the top one. Okay, so that we're doing that to our human family, just so you know. We're rightly upset about what they're doing to us, but we're doing this to them. Okay, what do we do about that culture? How do we really start wrapping ourselves around some meaningful modalities to start dealing with the realities? We're failing them, hence they're failing us. We can do better.
Thank you.
I would say that, there's some really knowledgeable people here who are working hard and have said a lot of good things, about how things are operating, how it would be better if they operated, and some super good efforts. But I would say to you as the public, please empower yourself in your interactions with government by going out there and doing what you can do, which is going to look different for every person. Some people are going to be, protesting in front of the courthouse. Some people are going to call their legislators and postcards. Whatever it is that you do, it's got to be more than voting. I've known a lot of people throughout my life that said, well, I voted. I'm super glad to hear anybody voting. I think it's important. I think it's huge. But we've got to do more than that, because not doing more than that it has really meant not setting some boundaries and not asking for what we need from our legislators. And without that strong feedback from a large segment of the population, those legislators are going to make their best guess, and they're going to be influenced by what they want and their biases, because they are human. So we have to speak up. We have to speak up and keep speaking up and keep speaking up. Thank you.
And real quickly, I just want to do a little closeout statement as well. I want to thank you all. You guys are here tonight, braving this hot weather, and you're here. You're engaged. And for me, this is special to me right now. Like I said earlier, I'm a 25-year police accountability expert. And for 25 years, I've been wanting to do some kind of town hall in this field. We've done it tonight. Thank you for creating a life event for me. And also, I want to thank our panelists, our impacted family members, who it took a lot of courage tonight to be on this stage and to share their stories. I want to thank police leadership for being here, because I've seen a lot of these meetings over 25 years, and over those meetings, I've seen a lot of police leaders get yelled at, heckled, and treated with disrespect. And so tonight, for us to have this kind of dialogue, this kind of conversation tonight, where nobody got heated, and we're going to leave here with more knowledge and more hope that we can do more in our community. And so right now I'm going to pass this off to Commissioner Farrell, and he's going to give you some resource connections on how to get engaged.
Yeah, here's some. Anwar already thanked you, so I'm not going to thank you again. Either, I guess, y'all. But I will say transformative and restorative justice is stuff like this. It's about having conversations across the aisle and not saying the aisle there anymore, but seeing that there's a human being who's developed into a system that we may not understand, where they're coming from. Which, if you'd like to understand, here's a plug that I'll do for myself. I work for Spokane Community Against Racism. Do we have all the stuff's back there? And I teach something called Decolonizing, Organizing, and Activism. It's basically talking about how the culture has impacted us. Because more than colonization doesn't just take over an area, it imposes its systems of laws and governance, as well as the culture. And so what does it mean, and how do we change that? We'll find out during that presentation. We have the Spokane Human Rights Commission, which hosted this. We are a less impactful part of the city than we used to be, but that should change, right? But it needs funding, it needs more engagement from you all. We hardly have anybody in the audience at those meetings, but you can come, you can say your piece, you can say honestly anything you want, and we'll listen. And that's really hard for parts of government to give you. Washington Coalition for Police Accountability. We have several people on that from here. They help with with drafting some of the new laws and advocacy there. The Office of Police Ombuds, if you don't know who they are, they're a complaint for the public as well as the police. And so please reach out to them if you have any issues or any questions. They are very friendly, and their office is right in City Hall. I did SCAR already. Citizen 926. A lot of people don't have the resources after something happens to their family because of police involvement. Citizen 926 has stepped up to make sure, hey, making sure they have somebody to talk to, or they have the resources necessary to hopefully fight maybe a long legal case that they might not already have the resources for. The Criminal Justice Training Commission. I'm sorry, Curtis, you talk about it a lot. I don't know enough about it, so I'm going to pass the mic off to you if you want to talk about that a little bit.
The Criminal Justice Training Commission is a commission that oversees certification, decertification, and training for the major agencies throughout Washington State. So one of the recent additions to that has been corrections, but Washington State Patrol, in municipalities, police chiefs, that kind of stuff. And am I forgetting anything, Bart? Yeah. Oh yeah. No, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things that, so as Bart talked about earlier, is we have been doing, and we talk about, him and I, bat this back and forth about how many of these complaints we're actually fielding, and it's a big conversation. And here to tell you, we're doing a lot of them, and more than's ever been done before. And the way to do that is to go ahead and go to the link, look up the stuff, go ahead and fill out the forms, and somebody will get back to you. And one of the things that's also available is because Walter Kendricks, Pastor Walter Kendricks, is also a criminal justice training commissioner. I myself am, Bart is, and so we're also available if by personal reach out if you need some help in kind of coaching through that, to go ahead and file that complaint. But what we can say is that they are absolutely being followed up on. Just maybe not to the speed that we would like. As Roger was talking about before, resources are an issue, and we want to put like $100 million into this and play off tens of millions of dollars over time, and probably hundreds of millions of dollars over time in lawsuits about this kind of stuff. But we don't want to put just pieces of that into providing the resources that we need to go ahead and handle the thing that we're complaining about as an issue. So, but we are doing something about it, and one of the Criminal Justice Training Commission link is a great resource to go ahead and get that process started.
Awesome, thank you. And the last link we have is OII. It's the newest Office of Independent Investigations. They are, I'm sorry, I don't. They're right over there. Go talk to them right now because we're closed. We're done. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks also to all our panelists for having these hard conversations. Have a good one.